I mean, there's a difference between talking about politics and enforcing some political, view. And so if you are in the United States and a patient wants to talk about politics, talk about politics. I don't see any trouble there. But if the patient's politics are different from your own, or if there's not a therapeutic reason for disclosing your own political values or disclosing your anything, I don't see the justification in doing it.
Jordan, welcome to Conversations with a Wounded Healer.
Hi, Sarah.
Take 3, basically, because we had 2 takes last time, and now this is another take.
Right.
People have no idea what you and I have been through behind the scenes.
Hard times all around.
Oh, so hard. But here you are again, and we're going to have a really good conversation. I brought you here because now it's like a million years ago. And actually, by the time this airs, it'll literally have been a year since I found an article that you wrote.
Right. Way back in 2025.
Way back in 2025, because it literally every day is a year.
Right.
Yes, in this times. Yes. So we'll get into your article in a little bit, but I posted your article on Facebook. It went very poorly. A lot of bad things happened. I was canceled. It's fine. We're fine. But I want to get into the nuances with you about the way that you see the question of, is therapy political or not? And we're probably going to fight about it. And I kind of like that you're up for it.
I'm there. I'm game for it.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, first tell folks who you are and what you're actually doing in the world.
Yeah. So I am, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me back. You're right. We've really been through it together. So I appreciate it. I am a psychotherapist. I was trained as a social worker. And I have a group practice out here in New York City, Lexington Park Psychotherapy. My PhD is in philosophy. And every now and then I write articles, and few have been quite so controversial, though I didn't really intend for it to be that way.
Right. Oopsies.
Right.
I mean, a lot. There's a lot more that's controversial these days. That it's a more complex world.
That's true. I mean, that is right, unfortunately.
Yeah. And what's your therapist origin story?
Well, there's a short story and a long story, like with everybody. So I'm going to try and give you that middle one.
Yeah.
For me, it was a bit overdetermined. Growing up, I didn't have a great relationship with my father or a very long relationship with my biological father. But my mom has always been kind of my, that person that I would go to. She's been kind of an intellectual and moral compass. And she was trained as a social worker. And she ended up marrying a guy who I now consider my dad. He's a wonderful man. And he's a psychologist. And so that language was, the kind of concepts and language was floating around the house all the time. The way that you would approach relationships and emotions and kind of understanding each other. That was all just kind of part of my upbringing in a way that I thought was very, very normal at the time. And shaking your head, not so much. But then I got very into philosophy once I got into college, and I pursued grad school in it, philosophy of mind and philosophy of the emotions and things like that. I kind of surreptitiously was going to school for philosophy and social work at the same time, 2 different schools at the same time. And there just came a moment when I had to decide between a postdoc in philosophy or kind of a career in psychotherapy. And my parents were very helpful in talking that through with me. And ultimately, I chose psychotherapy.
Because what do you do with a philosophy degree besides teach?
Right. It really is primarily teaching. There's some small roles in bioethics here and there. I was actually a visiting scholar at the Center for Bioethics for a bit.
What is bioethics exactly?
Yeah, great question. So bioethics has to do with the ethics of things relating to biological sciences and medicine. So
that makes sense.
But if you
ask the dumb question.
Well, no. I mean, it has to do with things like the ethics of abortion or of end of life care. Euthanasia is a big topic, particularly in the Netherlands and in Belgium right now. There's through parity laws, they've agreed to make it so that if you have certain mental disorders that you can receive euthanasia. Obviously, there's a kind of question about this because for things like severe depression, ending your life might seem like accelerating a symptom rather than a treatment, but it's not easy to explain how that would be different for cancer patients. And maybe it isn't. This is an area where I'm already stepping on my toes. I don't know enough about this. This is not my area of expertise, but that's kind of an area where people would, bioethicists would engage in.
That's interesting. So, I mean, your philosophical background, I think, I'm guessing, informs a lot of the views that you have about therapy. So
I think so. Yeah.
Then let's clarify for listeners what is philosophy?
Oh gosh.
Is that the most philosophical question?
Yeah, oh my gosh, this is the question I always dread getting. It's kind of polysemous as a term. So some people, when they say that they study philosophy, what they mean is that they're studying kind of individual people or groups of people who had kind of comprehensive worldviews. So I mean, think about, if you study Nietzsche, which I did, then you're really focusing on this man's ideas about the world. But then there's another way where it's about getting very precise, very rigorous around a topic or a certain kind of idea. And you follow, or ideally, I mean, in principle, you follow the logical reasoning, or you follow a certain type of reasoning. And so you think to yourself, well, if I intuitively feel that this is wrong, but the reasoning is so tight that my intuitions must be wrong. So you learn to doubt yourself in the appropriate ways, or discount your own beliefs in certain ways if they deny or if they run afoul of reason or rationality. So you're really kind of drilling down deep into something.
That's fascinating. Who decides what is reasonable?
So now you're doing it, right?
Right. Well, and yeah, go on.
Well, no. I mean, I was just saying, I mean, that's a brilliant philosophical question. I mean, many people ask. And sometimes it doesn't always come down to who decides. So sometimes it does, obviously. So for instance, there's kind of famous law, like the law of non-contradiction. Something cannot be A and not A at the same time. You can't say that.
I think Schrodinger's cat would have something to say about that, but go on.
Well, I love that. I mean, Schrodinger's cat, right. I'm going to sound like the most pedantic person in the planet, but Schrodinger was pointing out a kind of flaw in the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics, because it's ludicrous that something couldn't,
Yeah.
So anyway,
right. We're digressing a little bit, but it's okay.
Yeah. Or like syllogisms are, I guess, a classic example, right? Socrates is a man, all men are mortal, therefore Socrates is mortal. The structure of that reasoning is just so airtight, you kind of can't get out of it. And actually what's so frustrating about certain areas of politics right now is that people will just kind of throw out things that should be syllogistically tight, and then they abandon part of it halfway through. And the lack of logic and reasoning, I think, is one of those things anyway that's causing me to pull my hair out.
Well, I mean, I think this frames the conversation really differently, because this is putting logic and reason above everything else, right? And what I have learned in my trauma training, and personally as a trauma survivor, is to trust myself more, actually, to trust sort of the intuitive signs that I get from myself. And so if we're putting logic and reason at the top of the hierarchy, I'm already like, no, thank you. I want a combo. I want emotions, like body sensations and logic together.
Well, actually, I think that that's perfectly consistent. So I wrote in my master's thesis kind of about that. There's a kind of persistent myth, I think, that the emotions, at its worst, people will say that the emotions are actively corrosive to reason. And other people, it's not quite at the worst, but will say that it's kind of opposite to reason. And I don't think that that's right. I think, first of all, I mean, one of the big things that, well, okay, let me finish one thought before I get to the next. But
I do the same thing.
With the emotions, I think that they're more truth apt than people suspect. I mean, when you look at vomit and you feel disgust, I mean, it's not like you're being unreasonable. That seems perfectly fine. But I mean, also, I mean, a kind of classic example here is, imagine you won the lottery and you were devastatingly sad. And I could come to you and I could kind of probe for what's going on there. I could say, well, why are you sad? Are you worried that people are going to come, family members are going to be coming out of the woodwork for money? And if you said no, I would look for another reason. Okay, well, are you afraid that you won't be able to judge whether anybody likes you any longer because they might all be in it for the money? And you'd say no. If we exhaust all of those reasons, we might say, well, the fact that you're sad is incontrovertible. I mean, but what we can say is that it's not being responsive to reasons in some sense. And that would be interesting because most of your emotions are responsive to reasons. And this is where I was going to go to for this other kind of component, that one of the kind of sad things about society is we spend a lot of time. I mean, I think one of the reasons why this myth carries on is that we spend a lot of time teaching children how to develop their rational components of their mind or their cognitions, right? Their cognitive capabilities. And we don't do any work, really, or not much, kind of helping people learn to regulate their emotions. And actually, because I do think Martha Nussbaum, brilliant philosopher, has a number of books discussing the way that your emotions work as a kind of moral perceptual tool. She has an example of, I mean, imagine that you're on subway and you see some person walk in, let's say, and they've got bags, heavy groceries, and you just see them kind of look for a place to sit, and then they just kind of slump against, there's no place to sit, they just kind of stand. Well, you feel something. There's a kind of, I don't know what that emotion would be, but there's some qualitative experience you would see seeing that person. And that experience just is some perceptual, some moral perceptual invitation maybe for you to help or for you to do something. So that seems plausible to me.
Yeah. Well, how do we map this onto the question, is therapy political? What we came here to wrestle with.
Yeah, so I'm happy to open this up. So way back in 2025, as we said, I think I was actually writing this in 2024, but it's a totally different world, it feels like. But I wrote an article. I really intended it then, and I still believe that it is now, expressing a value shared by kind of mental health professionals writ large. I mean, I really do think that there is something that we share as mental health professionals about a kind of devotion to treating people in need. And I think that for perfectly understandable reasons. I mean, I think many people have fallen away from that value because the world has become a dumpster fire. Yeah, right. Because, people are getting killed in the streets and we're bombing other countries. And so it's very easy to get kind of protective about the people that you really care about. And in many ways you should be. And I totally understand that. And I think that there's a way of practicing psychotherapy without losing your humanity. And so a lot of this has to do, with the question of, is psychotherapy political? And I think this is going to sound, again, so pedantic, but I think a lot of this comes down to some definitions. So I remember I was speaking with a colleague not so long ago, and I was saying, well, I feel like when people say therapy is political, oftentimes what they mean, when I'm in that conversation, what I hear often is people say, well, who gets therapy is determined by legislation, and what counts as a disorder gets determined by kind of bodies that get influenced by NIH funding, or there's all sorts of political decisions that influence and imbue every moment of therapy. And I couldn't possibly disagree with that. I mean, if that's what we mean by therapy is political, then of course I agree. I think when people say therapy is political, oftentimes they mean something much bigger than that. If that's what we mean, if what they mean is just what I had just said, we could also say therapy is biological because it's influenced by the biological organisms that engage in it. we could say therapy is material because we're all made out of matter and stuff like that. It's kind of trivially true that therapy is political in that sense. When people say that therapy is political, sometimes what I hear is not just that trivial sense, but that therapists in their therapy sessions should be combating certain political views or enforcing certain, I think, humanitarian values. I think these are noble goals to combat certain political views and to advance human rights and social values. I don't think psychotherapy ought to be or is political in that sense.
Well, let's ground this in a specific example, because I think there are things that we definitely agree on and places where we diverge. Like, for instance, I'm going to be very vague here just to not like call anybody out, but I heard a story fairly recently where a practice owner had a clinician who was unable to work with a client because one of the client's parents was a police officer.
Right.
And that really upset me because
Sure.
when I say therapy is political, that's not what I mean.
Right.
And so I'm seeing a lot of what you're sort of describing is like a very particular way of sort of applying some of the ideals that we have. And I also think it's important to recognize where the idea of policing came from and have our own, opinions about that, and also want to shape the world in a certain way. And how
Agreed.
I hold that in the therapy room, and my dogs are going crazy. So whatever.
I welcome them.
Right? Yes, let's bring them in. They also
them in.
have their own political opinions.
Sure.
How I hold that in the therapy room, and it's interesting because I have thought so much about our first conversation, and I'll tell folks, let's just be honest. We recorded something. It took a while before it came out, and then Minneapolis happened, and it was about to come out, and I sent it to you, and you're like, hang on, maybe we should talk in a different way, just holding the context of everything that's happened. And so also, I'm just going to say right now, we are recording this in March of 2026, or April. It is April.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So for people, if something has happened between April 2026 and the time this comes out that we have not addressed, please understand there's a lot of stuff that goes in the podcast.
It's like that NPR timestamp, right?
Right, exactly. But what I realized sort of in continuing to unpack this question, because I think the question itself is crucial to talk about because of exactly what you're saying. We need to have a shared understanding within the field if we are going to figure out how we're going to get through this time together and how the field is going to evolve, period.
Right.
And one of the things I came away with is I think that part of health is wanting freedom and and when I say freedom, I mean liberation for people. And so I also think I don't have to force someone into liberation, but I can share examples in ways that might either model or things that I have seen in the world that I aspire to, right? That can then, I don't know, put it out there, but not necessarily change a client. And the thing that is, I think, especially hard about this particular time right now, this is a topic that needs so much time and nuance and a lot of really smart people having really hard conversations, and we don't fucking have time.
Well, that's true, right?
Like everything is urgent right now. And so I want to have space and compassion for especially people who are in marginalized bodies who feel like they're being asked to, see a Trump supporter who, doesn't believe in their own existence, right? Like I want to hold that compassion.
Right.
And I want to challenge us to be more nuanced and be more intentional and really hold this with a certain level of, I guess, maturity is the word.
Right. Well, I agree with you. I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head, I think, also with that initial example. One of the things that I've discussed in that paper was there's a kind of obvious counterexample to what I'm talking about. I mean, so for instance, growing up, I have had about 7 friends die from substance use related deaths. and I don't work with people who have substance use related conditions. So how do I square that? I suppose part of the thing I was saying is in that paper, it was partially motivated. I met this woman who had a therapist, and I think at some point, were discussing that posting a menorah on her Instagram, and the therapist scolded her, and she felt so, I don't know, hurt by her therapist's response. She left therapy, and this is all happening in the context of a pretty nasty divorce, and single mom and divorce and all this. This isn't to take sides or a stand on either side of that conflict. This is just to say this is a person's life, and deciding that you're not going to work with somebody or reprimanding them, that does feel to me like an abdication of your role as a healer. I mean, if that's the mantle that you've taken on. So then the question is, well, what do we do in a situation like me? How is what I'm doing not just as prejudicial? And the answer that I have, and maybe this is unsatisfying, is I don't have any moral opprobrium for people who are struggling with substance use related issues. I wish them all the best. I would be unable to sit across, right over there from somebody and not see a close friend of mine and just want to beg them or hold them down or something. And that's not therapy, and that's not fair to them. And
ooh, I have a fun argument.
Sure, give it to me.
You want to go there? Okay.
Oh, yes.
So okay. And yeah, let me unpack this, what I'm thinking. So, because my argument for everything related to therapy is that we got to do our own fucking work, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And so we have to do our own work around politics in order to be able to hold anything not neutrally, but with discernment.
Yeah.
Right? And so the case could also be made that maybe you need to do more work around.
Oh, no.
Right? Substance use. And of course.
I would agree with you.
Right. Exactly. So it's different and it's the same if we're talking about using ourselves as an instrument because if we're using this argument too, it really is inappropriate for someone who can't not comment on the menorah to be working with a client who might post a menorah, right?
That is exactly right. Sarah, I love this. That is exactly right. This is exactly my point. So I see this as a weakness in my practice.
Yeah.
That person deserves therapy. I am insufficient in some sense, or I'm deficient as a therapist. I am wholeheartedly, I agree with that. And like so many other therapists, I'm in therapy, and I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
The daylight, though, is that I don't think that that's an out for me. I think that that's a flaw that I have. Here's a kind of middle example, I think, is you can imagine, and maybe trigger warning or something here, but you can imagine a therapist who has been the survivor of sexual assault. Am I saying that they are required to work with somebody who has committed a sexual assault? Of course not. Of course not. But I think that we would all agree that even the most kind of disliked or quote unquote deviant conditions, something like pedophilia or something like this, these people are maybe the most in need of therapy. And so we agree that they need therapy, and we can still say that I'm probably not the person, but we also, I think, have to kind of say, well, it's not based on a hatred that I have. It's not based on a moral opprobrium. It's based on a flaw of mine, not of theirs. And when people sometimes talk about therapy being political and rejecting working with, say, police officers, like you said, or oftentimes it's said, I think sometimes as kind of like a badge of honor, or I'm part of the good fight, or I'm doing this work. Again, I cannot emphasize enough how understandable that position is. It's coming from such a deep and important and kind of pained place.
And understanding oppression.
Exactly.
Right.
Of which there's so much, happening right now. And nevertheless, I don't think that that's actually properly a part of therapy. So we can understand it from a human to human perspective, or even from a therapeutic perspective, we can understand it. But I don't think it's a part of the therapy.
I went to Psychotherapy Networker. You've ever been?
I'm not sure. No.
It's always in DC, unfortunately. It's a super big, giant conference that happens every year. 50th anniversary next year. Not that this is a commercial, but and there was a woman, her name is also Sarah. I cannot remember her last name, but I really, really liked her presentation on spirituality in therapy.
Okay. Yeah.
And the thing that I found really cool in her presentation was, if there are frameworks to figure out how we work with spirituality in session without blurring the lines, without like pushing some sort of agenda or belief with clients, then there's got to be that for politics too.
100%. Of course. I mean, listen, I was speaking with somebody not so long ago, and they were saying, well, if you lived in Ukraine right now, if you're a therapist in Ukraine right now, would you not talk politics with your patients? Well, of course you would. But I also don't think, there's a difference between talking about politics and enforcing some political view. So if you're in, I don't know, if you're a spiritual practitioner and your patient wants to talk about spirituality, then have a talk about spirituality. I don't see it. And so if you are in the United States and a patient wants to talk about politics, talk about politics. I don't see any trouble there. But if the patient's politics are different from your own, or if there's not a therapeutic reason for disclosing your own political values or disclosing your anything, I don't see the justification in doing it. So.
I do wonder if moving forward, self-disclosure isn't the right term, but sort of like shared humanity is going to be more important in the therapy room. And it's hard. Maybe it's just hard for me because I always use myself as the tool. And so I self-reference probably more than the average bear, but only in a, as a tool. And so I guess I wonder, because like, for instance, I have a client that we often end up talking about politics and we happen to agree on a lot of things. And there's so many moments where, she asked a question at one point, like, what even is therapy right now? And so we sort of like sit with this existential question, and I share sort of my reaction to it, in a very human way, because I think this is also part of the challenge of the right now times that we were not trained for, is we don't have answers.
Right.
We have answers to how you treat depression. We have answers for how you can treat, generalized anxiety, whatever else. But we don't, maybe there are models that I'm not aware of, but we don't have a ton of answers for living through fascism, right? And whether or not somebody believes that we're living through fascism right now, I believe they are still being impacted by it. And I don't have to tell them that in order for me to support them to move through it in a way that is going to be beneficial for them.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Part of my thinking here is also that it's just very difficult to live in a happy way and be so motivated by hatred or anger or distrust of the other, and so whether or not you have to say, hey, you're being jingoistic, or hey, you're being xenophobic, or whatever, or if you can just work with the hatred, which I think is the kind of core thing, and everything runs downstream. So there is a way to work with this. However, there's this kind of perennial debate about this with therapists, and I think land on the wrong side of this. I've heard people say, as the bombs are dropping, we need to be sending therapists to, these war-torn places. And my thought is we don't. We need to be sending aid. We need to be sending
Medical
food
professions.
and medical.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And listen, therapy I'm sure will be needed at some point.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing is that you're right. I mean, therapists, I think, in many ways are trained for depression and anxiety and things like this. So with some of the other research that I do, I mean, you just kind of obliquely sideswiped some of the other research that I do. I mean, so I was writing some articles on AI and psychotherapy, and you're talking about how we need to engage our humanity more. I couldn't agree with you more.
Mm-hmm.
And I also write on what the concept disorder means.
Mm-hmm.
And listen, if you're unhappy because you're living in a totalitarian state, well, that's not a disorder. I mean, that's responding to the environment.
Right.
Now, I think that there's a lot that therapists can do. I think that we can be very helpful in situations like that. But
I think we'll struggle to be helpful unless we do our own work around it, which goes sort of back to
right.
Yeah, and I guess what we're actually criticizing is rather than the idea of therapy being political, I think what we're really criticizing is some of the emergence of the way leftism has been used in therapy circles. And
Right.
I did an interview with Shelley Touchluck, which I think came out in maybe beginning of 2025, maybe 24. I don't know. What is time? We have no idea at this point. Where she's been an activist for a really long time. She wrote a book called Being White Today. And she said that what I was describing emerging in the therapist circles has been happening in the activist circles for a really long time.
Okay.
And so I think there's something to what is happening on the left and because it's hard to argue about whether or not caring for your fellow human is right or wrong. Like, I think most of us agree with that's right, but the way that we're applying that to people who would vote for somebody who doesn't believe that is where it becomes a problem. So
I think that's right, and that is that's a very valid tension point.
Mm-hmm.
But, and this is, again, part of the paper, is that being a member of a profession, it's something that I think is kind of an honor to be a part of social work. I really, it's kind of a storied profession. I really embrace that. And one of the great benefits is also one of its biggest curses, is that when acting as a professional, when that switch is on, I don't always get to make choices that would align with my personal views. And again, there's something kind of noble about that.
Or what I would say that differently. I would say I don't always get to make the choices that I would want to make.
Sure. Yeah.
Because that's a little bit different than my personal views, right? Like, because I'm thinking, I'm taking it out of politics and thinking about, I don't know, boundaries, something like that.
Well, sure.
I would probably, sometimes I have wanted to like hug a client or something like that, right? Where, I know that that's actually not clinically appropriate in the moment. Something like that. Yeah, sorry. I digress.
No, not at all. I use an example. I mean, you could imagine in all sorts of kind of contexts. The obvious one is kind of an attorney who is defending somebody that kind of vandalized their alma mater or something like that. And they love their alma mater, but they actually have to defend this person. Well, you have to put your own values to the side because you've adopted these much bigger values. Now, you can, when you're not acting as an attorney, you can go on your, Facebook group and say, this sucks. I hate that this happened. But when you're behaving as an attorney, you actually have to do your job. And one hopes that the profession, I mean, this is a part of the paper, is that everybody can't be everything. And there's a part of the time that we're in is that everybody has to be everything all at once. And it's impossible. You just can't.
That's the sort of mandate from the left.
I don't know. I see that as a big part of the right as well. I mean,
but we're not talking to them.
Sure. That's probably
here
true.
We're not, right? Because that's not the conversation. I don't think any Trump voters are probably listening to this right now.
Sure.
Again, I think there's a potential for evolution here. I don't think the profession and all of the rules should stay exactly the same. I do think that as we learn more, as things get more complex, we have to evolve. And so I agree with you on one hand that the profession is bigger, but I still want to challenge the profession to figure out a way to operationalize some of this in a way that more people have access to the nuance that's necessary to adopt it, you know?
I guess. I mean, some of the operationalization, I think, detracts from the humanity. I mean, we're basically saying, okay, well, if it's so operationalized that a machine can do it, then machines will do it. And we have to be kind of, I guess, open to that. But
because we probably don't have much of a choice.
Well, right. So there's some of that, but therapy is and medicine more broadly is a socially sanctioned profession. And so we kind of have to be responsive to society's values.
Right, exactly.
And when I say society's values, I don't mean kind of the mere attitudes that they have in any given moment.
Right.
Something more like manners or something.
Right.
But there's kind of overarching and some stable values. And I think we have to be responsive to that. So for instance, I mean, if you're a Christian scientist, and no offense to any Christian scientists out here, and you want to practice medicine and you're refusing to give, antibiotics to patients, well, you don't get to be a doctor then. I mean, you just, that's not an option for you. And I wouldn't want to see medicine evolve past that. And I think that we should, as therapists, look at something like oncology, right? If an oncologist can't reject seeing a patient on the basis of their political views, then you shouldn't be able to either. Or you shouldn't feel comfortable with it.
I think the challenge that makes it more difficult is that in treating somebody for cancer, you could ostensibly literally never know what people are thinking and feeling about certain values.
Yeah.
But because values are a part of the therapy process, and this kind of goes back to like, what are the agreed upon values? And the schism that we've seen politically has made it more of a difficult question right now. What values are right? And of course, like you and I can sit here and most other people listening to this are going to agree that like caring for other humans and like wanting the best for one another and being nice and whatever are good values. And people who could say that these are my values, but then vote for somebody like Trump, I think that's the place where it gets a little bit trickier. And I guess I just, again, it's I don't know that we exactly have the answer for that yet, but.
So you're right. I mean, the therapist gets to hear, I mean, just some, maybe some awful things, maybe about a group with which they identify.
Right.
And that the patient doesn't know.
Right.
And that is a particular challenge, but that's part of that burden that I think we take on. That's part of the nobility of the profession, I think. And where I think that you can say, I'm still going to help this person. I'm still going to protect this person. I'm going to care for this person and I'm going to help them. Right? This isn't about my values. This is about my profession. So
this is where my Al-Anon stuff kicks in.
Sure.
Done a lot of work in Al-Anon, and there is a point at which it then is harmful to the person to be able to sit with that, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Right, that's the nuance. And I wonder if this is where I think a white therapist has more of a responsibility to sit with somebody who's racist, let's say, right? And a straight therapist sit with somebody who's homophobic. My hope is that it's not an automatic like, well, you're homophobic, then I'm not going to treat you, but that there's some, maybe a decision. Like I want this, I feel like if we were embodied, if we were doing our work, there would be more space to sit with the complexity rather than just have a knee-jerk yes or no, I'm not going to do this, and also make compassionate, appropriate referrals when possible.
Yeah, right. And I just want to be clear as well. I'm not suggesting that I'm not suggesting that a therapist who's receiving kind of horrible abuse must, sit there and take it or something. When it becomes harmful, that's precisely when you are unable to help this person.
Mm-hmm.
So there is this line. Again, I don't know that we can operationalize that. I don't know that we would even want to. I think that this is going to be a kind of matter, a very individual thing for every person to sort out for themselves. But I do think that there is this kind of responsibility to be seeing these people that really, like a homophobic person or a racist person. I do think that there is that responsibility. And I think that these people are being hurt as well. And my real goal, I think, is just to kind of encourage people to engage with the person in front of them as much as possible as a person, rather than a opportunity for political or alignment or something.
Yeah. Well, we didn't answer all of the hard life's questions, but we certainly unpacked a lot. I know. And I really just appreciate like being able to grapple with and like dig into the nuances and anything that makes me think deeper about a topic that feels really important is, I think, worthwhile time spent.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, where can people find you?
Oh, I am at lexingtonparkpsychotherapy.com, and we've got some terrific therapists to check out. So please give us an email.
Amazing. Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for
such a pleasure, Sarah.
The long behind the scenes struggle that we've had to get back here.
Well, it's such a pleasure to be here.
I do really appreciate you.
Likewise.
Awesome. Thank you.
My pleasure.